Eric. This is a special edition of Eric's Got a Theory, otherwise known as the Red Shoe Diaries.
Yeah, I think we wanted to get in. We finally want to crack the top on the erotic fan fiction. And
No. That's not what this is.
Sugar on me. We are talking. We're not here to talk about Def Leppard documentaries. We're talking about.
Although to be fair,
Yes.
I absolutely could. Hysteria was one of the first albums I bought on LP, like on vinyl.
This is why we're different.
Hysteria is so great.
We're like,
it's a great album.
A lot of people don't realize this, and my gray hair may be giving it away later in years. I'm much older than Dan. I bought Pyromania on vinyl, not Hysteria, which I think is the album after that.
It is. Wait, no, it was High
Generation Gap.
No, Pyromania was after that. High and Dry was before.
Oh, I don't know. I was only into Pyromania. Foolin'.
Not even had
right?
nothing to do without
that's
Def
a great
Leppard.
song. I'll throw on Foolin' any day of the week. We're not here to talk about Pyromania.
Shoot.
Dan, before we get to what I had wanted to talk to you about, which is sort of like the Mavity Gravity thing. It's more than a joke. I think it's not just a joke. I want to talk about that, some of the evidence backing it up, and sort of explain it through graphics. But before that, I wanted to revisit our who is Mrs. Flood theory. We got some good feedback on that. A lot of people have different ideas and things like that, so that was fun. I am more convinced now that I am right about one part of it, but maybe not the second part. So for anyone who hadn't heard our previous mini-sode or whatever the hell we're doing here, I had theorized that the Mrs. Flood character was the Doctor's mother, the original, his original parent from previous. Whatever happened before the Timeless Child. Before
he even arrived on Gallifrey.
Yes. And then not only was that the Doctor's mother, but that was Ruby's mother. And that the Doctor and Ruby are brother and sister.
Right. Now, and this kind of made sense because the Timeless Child was kind of left at the doorstep of some building in Gallifrey, whatever, and discovered. Ruby was left at the doorstep of the church. We don't see the person leaving Ruby there, so it could be anyone.
You have a mystery about who her mom and dad are. They're not on the books. You have a mystery about the Timeless. Everybody, when they talk about the Timeless Child, I never saw a lot of talk about who birthed the Timeless Child. It was always like
what
the
happened
Timeless
before.
Child. Yeah. From what I remember, the Timeless Child was tied to a rock, in Clash of the Titans, right? Like it was like one of those. It just tied.
And there was a claymation stop motion monster that was coming up. Harry Hamlin.
Yeah, and Harry Hamlin happening. No, but so whether or not Mrs. Flood is the Doctor's mom / Ruby's mom, I think there is no doubt in my mind now that they are brother and sister. Or that they are both from the same world. Now, someone had commented, I believe it was Chuck, who had said, was this Timeless Child thing canon? I think he had not seen Flux or whatever. So I went out and I was like, I'll find him a clip. Right? So I find a clip of the Master revealing the Timeless Child thing.
The child is you.
Yep.
And it is very suspicious that they both refer to the Timeless Child as a foundling.
Foundling had become the founder.
And if you remember in Ruby Ridge Christmas, a Ruby Ridge Christmas
special, yes.
Church on a Ruby Ridge Christmas, the Christmas special.
Was that sponsored by the NRA? Yeah,
when it opens up, she specifically says,
"You don't mind me using the word foundling, do you?"
But the word foundling that ties to the Master referring to him as a or her as a foundling at the time.
Yep.
I'm convinced that they're brother and sister. And if you look at Russell T Davies, we've sort of had the love interest relationship with Rose and the Doctor.
I love you.
Quite right.
We've had it's harder with Martha. Like
there was
their
one.
dynamic
It was a non-reciprocal love.
And she wasted years pining after him, years of her life. Because while he was around, she never looked at anyone else.
It was a teacher-student, but yes, non-reciprocal love.
But she
absolutely.
did really, yeah. Mm-hmm.
She stands up for herself. You've got the BFF, best friends forever.
Totally. Platonic on both sides. Yeah.
But we haven't had a brother and sister.
No, we haven't.
So I feel like that's it. Whether I may be wrong about Mrs. Flood, that may be a completely unconnected mystery element,
separate mystery,
but that I feel like they are both timeless children or whatever.
I like it.
They're from that, and I want to pretend that they're related, but they're at least connected in that, and I will consider that to be siblings. Now, another listener, I want to get your name right. Oh, Idiot at Work. Now that's his name or her name. I'm not applying that to them. They had said no, it's Rassilon, Mrs. Flood.
Which is really interesting.
Which is an interesting, but it got me thinking, what if it's not Rassilon? What if it's Omega? You and I both love Omega. The last time we saw Omega, he was banished to the radioactive zone, or he's hanging out the negative zone with Jack Kirby. But in Arc of Infinity, he was trying to get into our world. I don't know if you remember this story well, but he comes from the negative, or not the negative land. I mean, there's E-space, and I think it's like a radioactiveville.
Sure.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, let's call it
that. He comes back looking like the Doctor. So he's already got Peter Davison takes his mask off in front of Peter Davison, and then there's two Peter Davisons, and then there is Peter Davison Omega, but like he's melting at the time, so it's not Peter Davison. It's just this weird plastic melting mask. But he's already we've done this sort of I have a different face kind of thing.
Imposter thing going on. Yeah,
could be Omega, to your point where you said like her personality changes, like finding a way back into this world.
Is Omega dead?
Well, he seemed to die before when he returned to confound us all.
Now, in the comics,
I think it's interesting because
may have come back already. I'm just only going by the proper show.
What I really like about the theory that it's Omega or even Rassilon, I think, with the 60th anniversary.
Hold on, pause on that. You said Omega.
Omega.
I'm saying Omega. Who is right? Because I feel like in the review, I was saying Omega.
In the show, they say Omega.
Am I just being pretentious? So it is Omega.
No,
Omega.
I think that it is just
what you doing?
The British versus American pronunciation of the Greek letter. So I think it's fine.
Fair enough.
Either way, whether it's Rassilon or Omega, if it's one of those, I think what's really interesting is what I like about it. It's a 60th anniversary year. Russell T Davies is obviously someone who loves the lore and the history. So just like we were saying, like, is it the Ronnie? Like pulling a character that had some basis in classic Who that we haven't kind of seen for a while. And to your point, maybe there's a ton of stuff in the novelizations and the comic books and who knows. So I don't know.
I'm sure we've seen
there's probably
Omega
a ton
again, but
this
I'm
is very interesting from
Arc of Infinity as being the end.
Yeah, for the TV series, that would be really, really interesting for him to pull something like that forward.
I'm bringing up the Omega thing in response to the comment. I am still going with Space Mom, that's going around dropping off babies.
I think it's a really cool idea.
And then maybe that is Mrs. Flood. Oh, one more Mrs. Flood thing, because I'm throwing out just Mrs. Flood things. Is Mrs. Flood also Mrs. Bean?
She was very put out, Mrs. Bean.
Mrs. Bean.
Head of the choir. She said it's not a war song, it's jolly.
Now, there's that thing with Donna talks about Mrs. Bean. Oh, when Mrs. Bean was back at school, this is clearly
this is not a nope. I am not signing on to this one.
Yeah, she is like, hey, remember Mrs. Bean? What's up with Mrs. Bean? Mrs. Bean was so weird. She always made us sing that song, Wild Blue Yonder, which is going to get into, or she calls it Wide
Blue Yonder.
Yep. Wait for a few minutes when we get into that business. But I was like, hey, maybe Mrs. Bean and Mrs. Flood. It's a lot of Mrs. and then
nouns. Mrs. Noun.
Now, if you're going to grow a beanstalk, you're going to need wood, or you're going to need a flood to grow a beanstalk to go into the other world. This is reality.
Yeah.
This is where the Doctor's from, Timeless Child. Yeah. You need a beanstalk to transport you between two worlds.
Yeah. I mean, this is all,
food for
it's all really obvious when you look at it this way. Okay, Eric. So
all
is
right,
it time for the red string? Is it time for us to like really?
Yeah, red string. And again, this is just I had mentioned it so many times, and sometimes I look over and Dan's eyes are glazing. I'm like, does Dan even know what I'm talking about? No, it's just because
I'm completely baked. It's cool.
To catch you up, in the Children in Need special.
Yes.
Right? So you see Davros and you see the whatever technician or whatever who's building the first Dalek travel unit.
Yep.
The doctor shows up and the doctor says a line about,
thank you. No, stop it. Look, I was never over here. Never. The timelines of the canon are rupturing. I'm just going to go and you're not going to say a word.
Everything's rupturing. Like the timelines are rupturing. And he says the canon is rupturing so that things are changing. Right. So that's sort of like the seed that gets planted. When we go into Wild Blue Yonder, there's the scene with
Isaac Newton.
Isaac Newton is sitting under the tree. The TARDIS appears. They make a gravity joke.
Right.
Gravity. Why?
You can appreciate
the gravity of the situation.
He says Mavity.
He couldn't remember the word.
Mavity.
Word that she said, which at the time I did even say, I looked it up in the OED, and the word gravity predated this by 100 years. Like that was not a word that should have been unfamiliar to someone.
Yeah, he didn't make the word up,
right,
but
so it's a weird. I'm fine with it, but it is a strange thing to be like, this is a new novel word when actually no, it really wasn't. But that's fine. Anyway, yes. So there was that, but
the idea of what gravity is. He's now said it's Mavity. But the thing that's interesting is that the Doctor and Donna don't continue to use gravity and are shocked to find everyone else is saying Mavity. That's what you would normally have in a timeline situation where you've changed the timelines and now you're experiencing your reaction.
Could be worse. We've got air, we've got light, we've got Mavity.
Yeah.
So a weird change in the timeline that has affected Donna.
Yes.
And has affected the Doctor.
Has not affected.
Now,
wait. Hang on. In Wild Blue Yonder, it didn't affect the Doctor.
It does and it doesn't. So the Doctor goes with Mavity at first. Later on, when they go to the bridge and we reveal, and these are spoilers if you have not seen Wild Blue Yonder, stop. We're going to spoil anything that's come out. You hear the banging on the side of the thing, which reminded me of the Station 5, or what was the guy that did Veep and he did that space show. Did you see it?
Nope.
There is
they
got a guy outside.
Was it Arliss?
That keeps not Arliss. You guys.
No, I don't know. But
anyway, when they reveal it, the Doctor is like,
caught in the gravity field.
Caught in the what?
Gravity field.
Donna's like, what are you talking about? What is gravity?
And he
Mavity, and then he's like, oh yeah. And now you could take that and say, oh, he realizes it's different. He's going along with it. He doesn't want to correct.
Which is the way that's the way I read on his face. Hey, something's going on here. Donna doesn't know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to deal with that right now. But I, the Doctor, know that the word is gravity, but something went wrong. And Donna doesn't recognize that. I think he was just in that instance, and it changes in a later episode. But in this episode, in that instance, I do think with Mavity and Wild Blue Yonder versus Wild Blue Yonder, the Doctor is in, we'll get to this, but Doctor's using the words that we know in our timeline and previously, where Donna is the one that's affected. And normally, like you said, if the companion and Doctor
is
together,
the bridge.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
because and then we also, there's another element there.
Okay.
And then later on they say Mavity again.
Yes.
Right. And the Doctor says Mavity again, I believe, without any
third time's the charm.
The Christmas special, right? Doesn't
Yes. So in the Christmas special he does say the Shooty-Gawa's Doctor says Mavity, which I think is important. Tennant's Doctor says gravity.
So this is where I'm going to explain.
Explain in air quotes.
I'll try to. Right. So this, hopefully, Dan, you're looking at
I am looking at the thing.
You have the gravity timeline.
Yes.
Right? That is the one that should have gone Jodie Whittaker, the Shooty-Gawa, right?
Yep.
That was going to be the timeline.
Yes.
When, for whatever reason, the Doctor breaks time by choosing to come back as David Tennant, it creates this mini timeline loop in which everything is falling apart. And ultimately, this time is going to correct itself. Now, the Doctor is sort of existing outside of it, but then he's learning to sort of accept this new timeline, subconsciously. He's aware of that what's right and what's wrong, but I think he's sort of going with it. I don't think he's fully awake to that.
Okay.
I don't think Doctor Who is fully woke.
Oh my goodness, here it comes.
to the situation that is going on. So within this spinning world that is the David Tennant into Ncuti Gatwa, two doctors breaking in two. I think that is time. The reason why this
bi-generation
happened is because the universe is trying to correct itself. It's not supposed to be David Tennant. It's supposed to be Ncuti Gatwa. And at the last dot here, I would put a question mark because I don't know at what time these two doctors are going to reform, whether that would mean David Tennant goes away and sort of it's still Ncuti Gatwa, or does this weird time frame, weird world exist for 3 or 4 seasons before this thing comes together? I don't know when that's going to happen. We see other evidence of this,
Eric, real quick, before you go on to the next bit of evidence, when we were talking about this before, I had thought that you were saying the time fracture, this little bubble of time that was happening, was as a result of the bi-generation or something else going on there. But what you're saying that is a consequence of this, like because of them. Whatever happens, like there's something interesting in the fact that they always go through time, and they're always like you would think changing history, and changing it in a way that's like, well, the history that would have been got corrected by them there, and then now we're on the timeline that we would all recognize when they go back in time. But in this case, for whatever reason, when they appear in front of Sir Isaac Newton in an apple tree, a thing that would normally happen, like, hey, we just met a famous, person from history and said some stuff that could change the timeline. It actually changed it in a way that we've never seen before. So I wonder what is the thing that caused that. I
think
it's him. Just did
it's him choosing his old face.
So
I
feel
goes
like
back
even further than that. Okay.
Right, his own desire to be with family and to come home, or whatever, however Donna put it, much better than I am. Was the reason, and because of that, like things are not right anymore.
Gotcha.
There is one other thing that we should talk about is the Wide Blue Yonder, Wild Blue Yonder.
Yes.
Am I going mad? What did the TARDIS play Wide Blue Yonder? Yeah.
When they're talking about why does they never really explain why the TARDIS is playing a war song or whatever, and then he thinks about it and he corrects her and he says,
"What's a Wild Blue Yonder?"
That's all still connected, by the way. When they talk about that song, it goes back to Mrs. Bean, by the way. Like, that's all connected to, he's like, oh, because Mrs. Bean said it's not a war song.
Right.
So there's some significance to that Mrs. Bean, why I was saying it was Mrs. Bean, Mrs. Flood.
Yep.
And like there's Mrs. Whatever, and it reminds me of Wrinkle in Time, like Mrs. What's it and Mrs. Who.
Yeah, right. Witch, great.
Right, all those things.
Absolutely.
It's not just a great book.
Great series of books. Yeah.
A great book about time travel. Really. Yeah. I mean, that book sort of changed the way I looked at time, like that whole thing with the string. And okay, it's fine.
Going into the mitochondrial, into the cells. It was great. Yes. I think we should let's just stop here and review all of the books in the series from Madeline L'Engle.
But that's the only book I've read, to be honest. As much as I loved it, and I read it several times, but I never read beyond.
The others were great. They followed the other siblings as well. It was really good. Anyway, forget it.
Anyway, so within this Mavity bubble here, this is also Davros, not in a wheelchair.
Right.
Newton, who I don't think is actually Newton, because they talk about how handsome he is and all that. I don't think that's because everyone knows Newton was notorious for being terrible to look at, a real eyesore. I didn't know if apologies.
Wow.
It sounded like
it's a real uggo.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, come on, he's fair game.
Sure.
But yes, so I feel like within all of this is sort of like Russell T Davies can kind of do what he wants, and he can break every canon and make everyone mad and make people just keep making videos with big block letters about
Doctor Who's ruined. Yeah.
Knowing that it's built into the storyline that it is going to collapse on itself,
and then result in whatever the thing
eventually,
is.
become a world in which gravity is gravity.
Interesting.
And all of that stuff is real. That's
I like it.
Where my head's at, Dan.
I
don't have any. I don't think I have any more
examples of how this all works. I think we
visual aids.
What we don't quite get to yet. I mean, obviously we shouldn't because the series hasn't really started in earnest. But we don't know how the Doctor chose to regenerate as a previous incarnation. Like we don't. As far as I recall, he doesn't have any idea why he did it either, or even how he did it. The only time that we've seen this previously is like the Sisters of Karn. With the War Doctor, right? That was where they were able to actually force a regeneration. Yeah, exactly. Yes. But they weren't. It was similar but different. They chose the incarnation of the Doctor that was most needed at the time, but not a previous incarnation. Maybe the Doctor that's needed at the time was a previous incarnation here, so that's why it had to happen. But yeah, I don't know how we got to that point. So it's interesting. I mean, there's some small precedent, but maybe something totally different.
And if it is all, and if I am right about the sibling thing, which I think I am, the foundling, like, what does that mean if now there's a whole universe, alternate dimension, whatever, of people that regenerate? I mean, because that's where the regenerative ability comes from the Doctor, right? They splice it into all the Time Lords, and then they're like, and they put a cap of 12 on them, but not this Doctor, so we could keep the show going forever.
Right.
But so, like, what does that mean? What does that do to Time Lords?
The whole Ruby being sibling thing, is that only in this little bubble universe that we have, or would that have been the way?
I think that's the way, regardless.
Okay, interesting.
Yes, absolutely. That I think. I don't think she is going to disappear when this loop closes.
The only thing we haven't...
I think she's just like him.
The only thing that really doesn't help with this is we haven't seen any evidence from Ruby that she is anything other than that she's anything other than a spectacular human. Like, there's nothing about, like, except for, obviously the missing parents that we can't find anything about. There's nothing,
it's all speculative. Yeah. Like, there's no real, like, we have the mystery parents, right? The mystery box thing getting set up for that. And we have the use of the word foundling.
Yep. Both being abandoned. There's the mystery woman.
But, like, I can feel it. Feel it in my bones.
I like it. I'm excited to watch the new series with this in mind and see, like, are there other hints that we can put to this? Are there some, like, red herrings that, is Russell T Davies aware that people are trying to pick this apart and figure out where he's going with it? So, like, what red herrings is going to throw in there? It's great.
I will add this. I'm often never right about any of this stuff. And if I could go back in time, you can find. If you could go back in time, if you had your own TARDIS, you could go to, like, the sci-fi message boards when Battlestar Galactica was out. I remember writing, like, a 3-page post about how I had determined, like, who, because the show, without spoiling anything, is Cylons look like humans, but they're really next level robots, and you had to figure out, like, who was the 6th one or the 7th one. I don't even remember, but I had a whole thing, and it was with math and charts, and I was completely
wrong. We could do that. There was also Lost. We had huge theories about, like, what was supposed to be happening. What was the island? It was a place in time. Was it? Yeah, but that was not our fault. That was really that was the writer's fault.
It's still fun.
It's great.
It's still fun. I know. I love these kind of things, and I'm glad to see them here.
Yeah,
and I was glad to see this kind of mystery. Oh, what's really going on? Cliffhanger type stuff in the Big Finish Battle of Giants Causeway audiobook, which we are going to review soon.
Yep. So keep your eyes out for that.
If you have not purchased it, yes, please. Please, it's like $12.
We'll drop a link.
We can't talk about it, so I can't ask you what you thought about it. Yeah, it's cool.
Cool.
So Giants Causeway too, Dan. You know I love Led Zeppelin, so the Houses of the Holy album cover, one of the most iconic album covers, is taken on Giants Causeway. So when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, I gotta jump into this." It's good. You paused on me. I didn't know what else to say. Like,
great,
they spray painted these. How much of my whatever ADHD was I going to let out. Like, oh, you really want to know about the photo shoot for that movie and how they had these kids and they had to spray paint them silver and it was bothering them. It was raining and they couldn't get a good shot. So they had to superimpose the kids multiple times. There was actually only 2 kids. But because the rocks were hexagonal.
You got it.
Hexagonal.
Keep going.
It was easy to place them together. And it's one of my favorite albums. It's an underrated album, right?
Sure.
No quarters on that album. All right, so Dan, I think that's it. We have another stay to this channel because we're gonna watch the what is it called?
Wasn't season 15?
Season 15.
Yeah,
we're gonna do that. So
you'll
stay
see that.
Tuned, like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Make sure you subscribe,
please.
We have like 81 subscribers.
Don't put that number in here.
And I told my neighbor that we had 1 million, and I kind of made a big deal at the cookout. I threw hot dogs at this lady, and I was like, "Oh yeah, check tomorrow." So if this doesn't happen, I have to fight one of his bigger children. They're like, I think they're in 7th grade, but they look like they're in 8th.